Okay.
Madam, start.
Yeah. Good morning, students. Welcome back to Zoology webinar. In the previous class, we dealt with which system in our body gives back carbon dioxide and water. So Prasanna ma'am has clearly explained about the anatomy of the respiratory system, where we give back carbon dioxide and water back to the nature, isn't it? Children, where we get energy? Do you know the answer? Generally, we say that if we eat food, we get the energy. Is it so? See, in previous class, I posed 3 questions. Which system does this? When this happens, the life process, when this happens, and what are the benefits of this system, isn't it? So once you know the anatomy, if you know about more physiology in detail, we all will come to know what are the benefits of this system. Once we eat food, it doesn't give us energy, isn't it? This respiratory system plays vital role in giving us energy. I welcome Manoj Kumar sir, PGT working at Mehboobaabad. Sir, good morning, sir.
Good morning, madam.
Yes, Manoj Garu, please start the session, physiology part.
Okay, thank you, madam. Thank you for making the introduction. So good morning, one and all. Hello, students. So it's very nice to see again. So how are you? How are you doing? Hope you all are really doing great, isn't it? Yeah. So students, in the previous zoology webinar session, you have learned about the anatomy of human respiratory system, isn't it? Now, after understanding the anatomy of human respiratory system, let us know the physiology of human respiratory system. So let us know the physiology of human respiration. So those who have joined, so let me introduce myself quickly. So I'm K. Manoj Kumar, working as PGT Zoology, Telangana State Model School, Mehboobaabad. And in this regard, I want to sincerely thank our zoology webinar coordinator, Vijay Lakshmi Madam, Principal, TSMS Jekapalli, Narsapur, Medak District. Thank you so much, Madam, for the support and for your encouragement. Thank you once again. Well, students, now I just made the physiology of human respiration into 3 parts. So it is for our convenience. So let's see the overview of the human respiration part 1. So here in this part 1, in this session, I'm going to cover these topics. So we start with introduction. So introduction to the topic and respiratory tract flowchart, anatomical setup of lungs, respiration and its types, respiration in human being, what are all the different stages, and diaphragm and intercostal muscles. So what is the role of diaphragm and intercostal muscles as far as the respiration is concerned, and breathing. So here we see the mechanism of breathing, which involves 2 stages. One is inspiration and expiration. And finally, we end this session with knowing about respiratory volumes and capacities. So, okay, students, is it clear? So in this coming up session, we are going to cover all these topics. So let's get started. So students, if you look at this picture, so what are you thinking? Yeah. So different people doing different works, isn't it? So here in this picture, we are seeing different people doing different activities. They are performing different tasks. So well, students, don't you think that for doing any task or any activity, we require energy, isn't it? So from morning to evening, or from our birth to death, so in our daily life, we used to perform many activities, isn't it? We brush, we bath, we eat, we sleep, we think, we read, isn't it? So we perform many activities, and where do we get energy to perform all these activities? Don't you think that we require energy to perform all these activities? Isn't it, students? Don't we think that energy is required to perform all these activities? Of course, certainly we require energy to perform all these activities. And not only human beings, all living organisms on this planet, they might be plants or unicellular or multicellular, isn't it, students? So all living organisms require energy to perform various functions in their life in order to survive, isn't it? So in order to survive, so look at this picture. You are able to see a different living organisms. Some of them are unicellular, multicellular, isn't it? Like different group of organisms were included in this picture, and all these organisms perform various functions in their lifetime. So even to perform all these actions or all these functions, they also require energy, isn't it, students? Not only we human beings, even all living organisms, though they are unicellular or multicellular, eukaryotes or prokaryotes, plants, animals, microorganisms, so all these require energy, isn't it? Now let me ask you one thing. So where do we get this energy from? So where does this energy come from actually? Okay, so let's see here. Yeah, students, look at this picture. So you might be thinking that how this picture is related with the topic. Yeah, let me tell you. So here in this picture, we are able to see different pictures. So here a motorcycle, isn't it? Here a petrol filling station, a petrol bunk. This is a machine. So here human being and different food items, and here this is the cell. Now I correlate all these things with one another because so the energy which is required to perform all the functions, okay, so this energy and the energy which is released in the human beings or in all the living organisms is almost very similar process that occurs in automobiles or vehicles, motorcycles, cars, isn't it? So it is almost very similar. Now let me explain you. So here in this motorcycle, if this engine want to run, okay, unless this engine gets started, so this motorcycle does not move an inch. Okay, so what does this engine require? So of course you know that here there is a petrol pump. So here this motorcycle requires petrol. So the petrol is the fuel, isn't it? So without this petrol, this motorcycle cannot run. The engine of this motorcycle cannot run. So here for this engine of motorcycle, so petrol is the fuel. Okay, so only fuel is not enough, children. Okay, so only fuel, petrol is not enough. So along with oxygen, so both oxygen and petrol mixture, okay, undergoes a process in the engine of this motorcycle, which releases energy with which this motorcycle able to run, isn't it? So petrol, which is a fuel, plus oxygen, both undergo a process, isn't it? And that process, as you already know, that is nothing but, yeah, yes, students, that is nothing but combustion. So here the combustion of petrol takes place in the presence of oxygen, which releases energy and with which this motorcycle able to move on. A very similar process takes place in human body, or a very similar process takes place in all the living organisms, in all the living cells, isn't it? So here the fuel for releasing energy in living cells, in living organisms, is organic compounds. They are nothing but nutrients. So we have already studied in the digestive system. So after digestion, the complex food is converted into simple nutrients. So those simple nutrients through blood reach all the cells, isn't it? Now these simple nutrients act like a respiratory fuel. So they act like a respiratory fuel. So these nutrients in the presence of oxygen undergoes a very similar process to that of combustion, but not exactly combustion. So a very similar process to combustion releases energy, and with which that energy is used to perform various activities, various functions. So don't you think the process is almost similar, isn't it, students? So here the fuel is petrol, whereas in human beings or in other living organisms or in living cells, what is the fuel? Nothing but simple nutrients, isn't it? For example, carbohydrates are converted into glucose, proteins are converted into amino acids, and fats are converted into fatty acids. So all these simple nutrients act like a respiratory fuel. So here petrol, and here nutrients, and here oxygen is required for combustion, and here also oxygen is a very essential for this process of releasing energy. So almost both the processes look very similar. So for this purpose, I have included these pictures. And one more clarity I shall give you, isn't it, students? So here, see, from the back of this motorcycle, so what you can observe, so here some smoke, isn't it? Carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and some toxic gases are released by this motorcycle when this engine gets started. When the process is under progress, when the combustion process is under progress, so this smoke with the different gases is released outside into the atmosphere, very similar to this. So whatever the energy releasing process occurs in the cells or in the living organisms, so in that process also some waste products or some byproducts are released, and one of the byproduct or waste product is carbon dioxide, which has to be eliminated out. Soon after its production, it has to be eliminated out of the body, isn't it? So more or less the combustion and the process of energy releasing which occurs in the living cells or in almost all living organisms are very similar. Okay, so for this purpose only, I have included these pictures here. Now coming to the human respiratory system, isn't it? So till now we have discussed it. The energy is very much required to perform all the activities. So where do we get this energy from? So there is an exclusive system which you have studied in the previous zoology webinar session, isn't it? So you have gone through the anatomy of this human respiratory system, the various structures, isn't it? So this human respiratory system is often described as the energy releasing system. So this is often described as energy releasing system, and this human respiratory system performs a process called respiration. Students, listen, this is the respiration. This is the actual process which occurs in the living cells, which occurs in almost all living organisms, which releases the energy, isn't it? So this respiration is performed by the human respiratory system. Hence, this respiration is described as the energy releasing process. So what is the energy releasing process? Where do we get this energy from? By this process called respiration. I think you might have studied this in your 10th class. Do remember, students? Got it? Yes, respiration, the energy releasing process. So by this, we get energy. So human respiratory system, lungs, isn't it? So a pair of lungs, the primary organs. So these are the lungs which are the primary organs of respiration in human respiratory system. So these lungs serve as gas exchanging organs. They serve as gas exchanging organs. These are the primary organs of respiration in the human respiratory system. Now, let us quickly recap what we have studied in the human respiratory system. So you have gone through the respiratory tract, isn't it? So let us quickly recap those structures. So this is the flow chart, and this is the picture showing the respiratory tract. So the respiratory tract is distinguished into upper respiratory tract and lower respiratory tract, isn't it? And the upper respiratory tract comprises of nostrils, nasal chambers, pharynx. Here, see, pharynx, larynx. So all these structures come under upper respiratory tract, whereas the lower respiratory tract includes trachea. So this is the windpipe. We usually call it as windpipe, isn't it? And divides into two bronchi and further divided into smaller and smaller branches called bronchioles, isn't it, students? So all these are enclosed in the lungs. So these structures are called a lower respiratory tract: trachea, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, bronchioles, and tiny thin-walled air sacs. Yes, exactly. They are called alveoli, isn't it? So all these are present inside the lungs. So this is the respiratory tract. Okay. So this is the picture showing the respiratory tract. Let us see the flow chart. So nose, it starts with nostrils, nasal chambers leading into nasopharynx, oropharynx, laryngopharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli. Isn't it, students? The alveoli are the structural and functional units of lungs or our respiratory system. So they are closely associated with capillaries of lungs. So this is a quick recap what we have studied in the previous zoology webinar, that is anatomy. So let's come to the current topic. So the present topic is what is respiration. So students, what is respiration? What actually respiration means? So most of the people, so when we talk about respiration, so many of us think breathing. So breathing is nothing but respiration, but it is not exactly. Breathing is a different aspect, it is a part of respiration, but respiration is more than a breathing. But many of us, most of the students, most of the people used to think that a respiration and breathing are similar or same, but not really. Let us see. So what is respiration? What happens exactly in the respiration? So just now I told you that the oxidation of food, here the food is nothing but the nutrients, the simple sugars, that is glucose. So see here, the organic compounds, the nutrients, the glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, so all these are the organic compounds. So these get burned or they are broken down. So they are broken down in the presence of oxygen. So the organic compounds are broken down in the presence of oxygen, which is nothing but oxidation of food. So that is described as oxidation of food. And this oxidation of food releases energy. And along with energy, carbon dioxide, water are also released. So this is how we get energy to perform various life activities. Even our cells constantly require this energy to perform their cellular metabolism, isn't it, students? Now let us see some points regarding the respiration. So respiration is a vital feature of life, no doubt. So there is no doubt that respiration is a vital feature of life. So without respiration, no living organism able to survive. There is no life without respiration. So respiration is a vital feature of all living organisms. And respiration is a catabolic process. Students, do you remember the metabolism is of two types, like one is anabolism, another one is catabolism. Anabolic process, catabolic process. So here the respiration is a catabolic process. So in the catabolic process, the release of energy takes place, and it occurs mostly by the oxidation of food. And this more accurately, if you define the respiration, so more accurately the processes leading to and including the chemical breakdown of food materials to provide energy for life is called respiration. So respiration is defined as the processes, so all the processes which are leading to, in which all these are included, the chemical breakdown of food materials, here the nutrients, the chemical breakdown, chemical in the sense that the enzymes are involved, here the respiratory enzymes are involved. So the chemical breakdown of food materials takes place, and which provides energy for life. So this is how you define respiration. So already respiration is an example for catabolism. So let me also clarify anabolism. Students, let me clarify the difference between anabolism and catabolism. So anabolism is a process where the simple molecules combine together to form a larger molecules. So see here, these are simple molecules, simpler ones, simple units. So all these get combined, all these combine together to form larger ones. So from simple to complex, from smaller to bigger or larger molecules are formed. So this process is called as anabolism or anabolic process. And for this process, energy is required. Energy is required. So all the simple molecules utilize larger molecules. So this is described as a constructive process. The anabolism is described as a constructive process, whereas on contracts with the anabolism, the catabolism, see here the catabolism, what is happening? So the larger molecule or the complex molecule is getting divided, it is divided into simpler ones, it is divided into smaller ones. So in catabolism, what exactly happens, the larger molecules divide into smaller ones, or the complex ones divides into simple. So from complex to simple, simple. So this process is called as catabolism. So this is also called as destructive process. The catabolism is also called as destructive process, and usually the example for catabolism is respiration. So here the energy is released. So this arrow mark downwards, this downward arrow mark indicates that during this catabolism the energy is released, whereas during anabolism the energy is utilized. So for catabolism the good example is respiration, whereas for anabolism the good example is synthesis of glucose. Students, do you remember the process of photosynthesis which you have studied in your 10th class, isn't it? So where the glucose is synthesized from all the simple molecules such as carbon dioxide and water combined together to form C6H12O6. So from simple to complex. So the process of photosynthesis is a good example for anabolism. Now students, can you able to differentiate between anabolism and catabolism? So here the respiration is absolutely a catabolic process, or it is a destructive process. So here the breakdown of glucose takes place to release energy. Along with energy, carbon dioxide and water, the simple molecules are formed. So let us see quickly. So this is like a cell. So this represents cell, a living cell. So here, see, sugar, the glucose molecule enters into the cell, and also the oxygen molecule also enters into the cell. So this represents cell. So the sugar molecule enters and the oxygen molecule enters into the cell. So what happens? A process called respiration. And more exactly, this is called cellular respiration, because as it occurs inside the cell, so we can call it as cellular respiration. So this respiration process occurs, and with which energy is released. So here, see, the energy is released. And what are the other products that are released during the process of respiration? See here. So here, this is carbon dioxide. So this is a waste product which is formed as a byproduct, and this is moreover toxic product. This is a toxic substance. Carbon dioxide is a toxic substance, so it has to be removed soon after its production. Otherwise what happens? This gets mixed with the body fluids, and our pH of body fluids, the pH of the blood gets changed or altered, and that might affect the functioning of vital organs such as brain, heart, and other, isn't it? So soon after its production, it has to be eliminated or removed out of the body. Okay, so carbon dioxide is produced, and here water is also produced. And of course water is used for our metabolic activities, and if any excess water is present, so some of the water is eliminated in the form of exactly urine. You have studied the excretory system, isn't it? So in the process of excretion, excess water is removed in the form of urine, or sometimes the excess water is also removed in the form of sweat, and some water converted into vapors, and some vapor is also left along with the carbon dioxide. So this is like a process of respiration that occurs inside the cell. Yeah, coming to types of respiration. So already you know this, students. So you have studied this in your 10th class. Again, I'm like recapitulating the things. So here, see, how many types of respirations are there? Yeah, exactly. Two types of respirations are there. So one is aerobic respiration. So aerobic respiration which needs oxygen. So here air, more precisely, that is oxygen. So oxygen is required. So with oxygen the aerobic respiration proceeds, whereas in the absence of oxygen, or in the presence of very low oxygen, or in the absence of oxygen, again the respiration proceeds, and that respiration is called anaerobic respiration. So what does it call? Anaerobic respiration. So there are two types of respirations, students. One is aerobic respiration which proceeds in the presence of oxygen. Another one is which proceeds in the absence of oxygen, or it may also occur even in the presence of very low amounts of oxygen. So aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. So let us see a flow chart. So this is the glucose molecule, the nutrient, organic compound. So there are different phases or different stages of the respiration, like we have glycolysis, we have Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain system. So all these are the different stages of the respiration. So here the glycolysis. So up to glycolysis, it is very common in both anaerobic respiration and as well as aerobic respiration, children. There is no much difference. Okay. So as far as glycolysis is concerned, so this is very much similar in anaerobic and aerobic. But here, after glycolysis is completed, and when a pyruvate compound is formed, this is an intermediate compound that is formed in the process of respiration. So from here, if oxygen is available, if plenty of oxygen is available, so the aerobic respiration proceeds. If at all there is no oxygen or very low amount of oxygen is available, then the anaerobic respiration proceeds, isn't it? So these are the products along with the energy. So these are the products, especially in animal muscle cells. If you see, due to the anaerobic respiration in animal muscle cells, in animal cells, the lactic acid is produced, whereas in plant cells, due to anaerobic respiration such as bacteria, so ethanol is produced along with carbon dioxide. Whereas in aerobic respiration, which occurs in mitochondria, so here carbon dioxide plus water, okay, along with a huge amount of energy is produced. So this is a picture which shows the process of anaerobic respiration and aerobic respiration. Now let us distinguish between aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. So as I already told that, students, the aerobic respiration occurs in the presence of oxygen. In contrast, anaerobic respiration does not require oxygen. So in the absence of oxygen, anaerobic respiration takes place. And here, the complete breakdown of food materials takes place. So in the aerobic respiration, as much oxygen is available, so here the complete breakdown of, or the complete oxidation of the food materials takes place. Whereas in the anaerobic respiration, as no oxygen is available or very low oxygen is available, so here partial oxidation of food materials takes place, or incomplete breakdown of food materials takes place. And as here complete oxidation or complete breakdown occurs, so usually more energy is released, or huge amount of energy is released. Okay. And here, due to partial oxidation or due to incomplete breakdown, very less amount of energy is released as compared to the top aerobic respiration. And coming to aerobic respiration, it occurs in cytoplasm and mitochondria. The cytoplasm, the fluid matrix of living cells, isn't it, students? So in this cytoplasm and in the mitochondria, so the process of respiration occurs. Whereas in anaerobic respiration, the complete process of respiration occurs in cytoplasm only. So here the mitochondria is not at all involved. Okay, so even the cell organelle mitochondria is usually absent here. So the products of aerobic respiration are carbon dioxide and water. And here, especially in plant cells, if you see, the products are ethanol, or if we say in the animal cells like muscle cells, the product is lactic acid. So this is how you can differentiate between aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. And the examples for aerobic respiration are most of the animals like multicellular, that comes under the plants, animals, isn't it? Most multicellular organisms do come under the aerobic respiration performing organisms. Whereas under anaerobic respiration, we used to see yeast. So yeast belongs to fungi. Yes, yeast belong to fungi, and some bacteria also perform anaerobic respiration. And at certain conditions, students, remember this point, at certain conditions where there is shortage of the oxygen, or when there is not enough supply of oxygen to the muscle cells, even in human beings. So these muscle cells also perform anaerobic respiration, producing lactic acid. Now coming to the actual process of respiration. So the respiration in human beings, if you see the respiration in human beings, it involves the following steps. So most importantly, we can sum up like 5 important stages are there in the respiration. We start with the first one, breathing. So the first step in the respiration is breathing. So this breathing is also called as pulmonary ventilation, or this is also called as external respiration. And the second one is diffusion of gases. And this diffusion process occurs across alveolar membrane, that is inside the lungs we see alveoli. So there is an alveolar membrane, respiratory membrane. So across this alveolar membrane, the diffusion of gases takes place. And here the gases are carbon dioxide, oxygen. So the mutual exchange or the diffusion of gases takes place. So we also call it as exchange of gases. So the mutual exchange of gases. So O2 enters into bloodstream from alveoli, and whereas carbon dioxide enters into alveoli from the bloodstream. So this is how the mutual exchange of gases takes place inside the lungs or at lung level. So this is also called as diffusion of gases 1. Students, this is like diffusion of gases 1, because we come across one more diffusion, so that is called diffusion of gases 2. So here this is diffusion of gases 1, which occurs inside the lungs. Now the third stage in the respiration is transportation of gases. What happens in the third stage? The transportation of gases. Again, the transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Students, the human respiratory system directly works along with the blood circulatory system. So remember this point, students. The human respiratory system works directly along with the blood circulatory system. So here, the blood circulatory system, the blood vessels, the blood come into action. They play a major role in the transportation of gases. So the blood acts like a transporting medium. The blood acts like a transporting medium. So here, the transportation of gases by blood between lungs and tissues, especially the transportation of oxygen occurs between lungs and tissues with the help of blood. And similarly, the transportation of carbon dioxide occurs by blood, okay, between tissue cells to lungs. So this is how the transportation of gases takes place. And the fourth step is diffusion of gases. So this is like a diffusion of gases 2. So diffusion of gases 2, because already we have come across 1, diffusion of gases 1, which occurs inside the lungs. So this is the second diffusion, which occurs at the tissue level. So once the blood carries the oxygen towards tissues, so here between cells or between tissues, okay, and the blood, again one more diffusion takes place. So this is called diffusion of gases at tissue level, or the exchange, again the mutual exchange of gases takes place. So the oxygen from blood enters into tissues or cells. Again from cells, the carbon dioxide enters into the bloodstream. So the mutual exchange of gases takes place at the tissue level. And the most importantly, the last one is the internal respiration. The internal respiration. So this is also called as cellular respiration. So why this is called cellular respiration? Because the actual releasing of energy, the energy releasing process, the actual energy releasing process takes place inside the cells. As it occurs inside the cells, or as it occurs inside the tissues, so this is also described as tissue respiration or cellular respiration. As it occurs in the innermost part of the cells, so this is called internal respiration. So these are the steps in the process of respiration as far as human beings are concerned. Of course, this all occurs in the all vertebrates also. Now students, so while looking at this picture, so what is he doing? Is he respiring or is he breathing? So what is he doing? Yeah, some of you are saying breathing, some of you are saying respiring. Is he respiring or is he breathing? Let's see. Is breathing and respiration the same? Students, is breathing and respiration the same? Not exactly. Already I have given some information. So breathing and respiration are somewhat different. They're not similar. Breathing is a part of respiration. Breathing is a part of respiration. Now let us know regarding the definition of breathing. So here, look at this picture. What is happening here? So see here, taking in. So what is he taking in? He's taking air. So the air is going into the lungs. So taking in air. And here again the air is coming out of the lungs, isn't it? So taking out, taking in. So the definition of breathing is, breathing means the physical movement of, students listen carefully, what is breathing? Breathing is the process where the physical movement of air takes place. The air moves into the lungs and the air move out of the lungs. So the physical movement of air between the lungs and the surrounding medium or the atmosphere here, So this process is called breathing. So this is very simple process. This is a biophysical process, isn't it? A very simple process. Simply here what is happening, breathing is nothing but taking in air and giving out air, taking in air and giving out air. So this is breathing, whereas respiration is a very complex process which involves or includes several steps. Now let us differentiate between breathing and respiration. So breathing is a physical process. As I already told that this is a physical process. Here, nowhere the chemicals are involved or the enzymes are involved, isn't it? It is a physical process, a simple physical process. The physical movement of air takes place. The air enters into the lungs and the air leaves the lungs. So that is called breathing, moving air in and moving air out of the lungs. Whereas respiration, it is a biochemical process. Biochemical, because here the respiratory enzymes are involved. The chemicals, these enzymes are chemical in nature. They are chemical in nature. Hence, this is a chemical process, and this is very simple process. There are no complexity. There are no steps involved. Only two steps are present in the breathing, like inspiration and expiration, or inhalation and exhalation. So very simple process. But whereas respiration is concerned, there are several stages or several steps included in this. So this is definitely a complex process. A very complex process is the respiration. So here no enzymes are involved, whereas in the respiration many respiratory enzymes are involved, especially the process which occurs inside the mitochondria. So here in the mitochondria, several respiratory enzymes are released and they do carry the process of respiration. So many enzymes are involved here. And in the process of breathing, no energy is released. Here, no energy is released. The energy releasing process does not occur in the breathing. So here, simply the movement of air takes place between the body or between lungs and the atmosphere. So here, no energy is released. Energy is not released during the process of breathing. Whereas in the respiration, certainly the energy is released. We have seen in the previous slides, isn't it? So by the oxidation of food, whether it is anaerobic respiration or aerobic respiration, doesn't matter, whether in the presence of oxygen or in the absence of oxygen, isn't it? So ultimately the energy is released, whether huge amount or very less amount, but ultimately the energy is released in the process of respiration, whereas here no energy is released in the process of breathing. Whereas breathing, it is a just part of respiration. So respiration involves several steps. Of them, breathing is just one part. Breathing is just one part of respiration. So this is how you can differentiate between breathing and respiration. Now students, hope you understood the difference between breathing and respiration. Now if anyone asked you a question like what is respiration and what is breathing, now I think you can clearly answer them. The respiration, what is respiration, what are all the events that occur during respiration, and what is breathing, I think you can able to answer them very easily. So look at this picture, students. Now coming to the anatomical setup of lungs. So if you, in order to understand the process of breathing, so before understanding the mechanism of breathing, so try to understand some things here. So a very important one is anatomical setup of lungs. So the lungs are arranged in the chest cavity. I think you have studied in your the anatomy part. So where our lungs are situated, in the chest cavity, in the thoracic cavity. So this is the cavity above the diaphragm. So this is the diaphragm. So diaphragm is a partition that divides the body into two chambers. This is the anterior chamber called thoracic chamber, thoracic cavity, and below the diaphragm there is an abdominal chamber. So the lungs are situated in the thoracic chamber or the chest cavity. So how this chest cavity is formed? How this chest cavity is formed? So the chest cavity is formed ventrally by some bony structure. So this is called as sternum. So this is also called as breastbone, commonly breastbone, or this is sternum, and this is a xiphoid process. So this is ventrally located sternum. And on the lateral sides, on either side, see here the lateral sides. So we have 12 pairs of rib bones. So these are bones, lateral bones, ribs. They are commonly called as ribs or rib bones. So on the lateral sides, we have, on the chest cavity, the lateral sides, we have the ribs. On the dorsal side, we have vertebral column. Okay, so on the dorsal side we have vertebral column, on the ventral side we have sternum, On the lateral sides, we have 12 pairs of ribs. And on the floor of the chest cavity, we used to see the dome-shaped muscular diaphragm. So this is the dome-shaped muscular diaphragm. So by all these structures, the chest cavity is formed. So this chest cavity is like anatomically, we can say that it is an airtight chamber. This is an airtight chamber. Our chest cavity or our thoracic chamber is like an airtight chamber, and it is surrounded by all these structures, ventrally by sternum, dorsally by spine or vertebral column, laterally by ribs, and on the floor we have a muscular dome shaped diaphragm. So the thoracic chamber is an airtight chamber. Now internally see, so this is the thoracic chamber, thoracic cavity, and this is the muscular dome shaped diaphragm. So this is a partition diaphragm which divides the thoracic chamber from the abdominal cavity. So the abdominal cavity is situated below the diaphragm. So this is the abdominal cavity, and this is the parachute like structure or dome shaped structure called diaphragm. Okay, so this is present on the floor of the chest cavity. So this is the chest cavity or thoracic chamber. So this is the thoracic chamber or thoracic cavity. So this is an airtight chamber. So it is very essential, it is very essential that if it is like an airtight chamber, what is the significance of this airtight chamber? So any slight change in the volume of chest cavity will be reflected in the pulmonary volume. Listen students carefully, what is the significance of this airtight chamber? So any slight change in the volume of chest cavity or in the volume of thoracic cavity will be reflected in the lung volume, or it will be reflected in the pulmonary volume. So this is very essential for the process of breathing, because let's see, so these are the lungs. So do lungs have muscles to show breathing movements? Do lungs have their own muscles? Do they have their own musculature? Do they by themselves can extend or expand? Do they have that musculature by themselves? Do they expand or not? Do they have muscles to show breathing movements? No, they do not have their own musculature. Students, listen carefully. Our lungs are soft, spongy, elastic in nature. Our lungs are soft, spongy, and elastic. It is made up of an elastic tissue, but the lungs do not have muscles. So there is no musculature in the lungs. So by themselves, they cannot expand, or by themselves, they cannot show the breathing movements, isn't it? So here, the muscular diaphragm helps in the process of breathing, and the flexible intercostal muscles also help in the process of breathing. So the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles help the lungs to show the breathing movements, So the muscular diaphragm and the flexible intercostal muscles, these are also called as rib muscles. Students, the intercostal muscles are also called as rib muscles. Why they are called as rib muscles, I used to tell in the next slide. So these muscles help the lungs in showing the breathing movements. So this is how, with the help of diaphragm and the intercostal muscles, this is how the chest cavity expands and again comes back to its original position. So here the chest cavity is expanding, and here it is coming back to its original position. So see here, this is the diaphragm, muscular diaphragm, dome shaped diaphragm. So this gets flattened during the expansion of the chest, and this comes to its original dome shape during the expiration process. So the diaphragm and as well as the intercostal muscles or the rib muscles helps the lungs in showing the breathing movements. Now this is another picture showing the diaphragm. So this is another picture showing the diaphragm. So this is like a dome shaped structure. So see here, this is attached to the muscles. Rib. This is attached to the rib bones, And here, this is like a central tendon part of the diaphragm, which attaches to the lumbar spine region. So this is the spinal, this is the vertebral column, also called as spine. So here, the central tendon portion, so it gets attached to the vertebral column, and here on the lateral sides, on the peripheral margin, so this is attached to the rib muscle. So this is how the diaphragm is located or situated in the thoracic cavity. Just it forms the floor of the thoracic cavity. Now this is another slide showing the same diaphragm. So see here how parachute like diaphragm is. And from the lower angle, students, so this is from the lower angle. So this is how it looks like. The diaphragm looks like this, like parachute or dome shaped structure. It has some, see here, some apertures. So these apertures are meant for running down the esophagus, isn't it? Running down the aortic blood vessel, aorta, main blood vessel, aorta, which runs down, okay, supplies oxygenated blood. And there is one more aperture which is meant for the vena cava. So the inferior vena cava passes through this aperture and reaches the heart. So there are three apertures in the diaphragm meant for, one is for esophagus, another one is for, yes, aortic blood vessel, another one is inferior vena cava. So this is from the lower angle. So this is how it looks like, and this is the vertebral column. This is vertebral column. And coming to the intercostal muscles. So where does this intercostal muscle, the word comes from? The intercosta. So this is taken from Latin. So the intercosta comes from Latin. Inter means between, in between, inter, in between. Costa, which means rib. So costa means rib, whereas inter means in between. So these are the muscles present in between the ribs. Students, intercostal muscles are the muscles present in between the ribs. Hence, they are also called as rib muscles, intercostal muscles or rib muscles. So we have 12 pairs of ribs, and whereas we have 11 pairs of intercostal muscles. So 12 pairs of ribs, rib bones, and whereas intercostal muscles, how many pairs of intercostal muscles do we have? Yes, 11 pairs of intercostal muscles are present. Okay, and these intercostal muscles can be differentiated into three types, but here most importantly I have given you two types. So one is external intercostal muscles, second one is internal intercostal muscles. So the external intercostal muscles are usually situated on the superior margin of the rib bone, whereas the internal intercostal muscles are situated on the inner margin of the rib bone. So the intercostal muscles are three types. So here I have given two types: external intercostal muscles, internal intercostal muscles, and the third one is innermost. The third one is innermost intercostal muscles. So this picture clearly shows the arrangement of muscles. So these are the rib bones, the white colored portion. The white colored structures are the bones, the rib bones. So these are the rib bones. We have 12 pairs, and in between them, see some colored portions, like here red color, some slight like green in color, like brown in color. So these are the muscles. So these are the muscles that extend between the rib bones. So if you see in this picture, it is very much clear. So this is one rib bone, and this is another rib bone. So this is one rib, this is another rib. So in between these two ribs, so this is how the fleshy part is. So these are the muscles located between, these are the muscles located between two ribs, two successive ribs. So here, see, these are present on the outer margin of the rib. So these are called external intercostal muscles. And the next two, on the inner side of this external intercostal muscles, we have another muscle called internal intercostal muscles. So this is internal intercostal muscles. And there, see here, we have innermost, the third type of intercostal muscles, the innermost, because they are situated on the innermost side of the ribs. Hence, they are called as innermost intercostal muscles. So from outer to inner, so first we see external intercostal muscles, internal intercostal muscles, and innermost intercostal muscles. So this is the picture, it is clearly shown. So see here, external intercostal muscles. So these arrow marks indicate the movement of, or the contraction and relaxation of the muscles, the movement of muscles are in this direction, whereas the internal intercostal muscles here, see, these are the two rib bones, and this is how the internal intercostal muscles extend between two rib bones, and this arrow mark shows or represents the movement of the action of internal intercostal muscles. Now students, this is a small animated video I shall show you, which shows the functioning of diaphragm. So see how diaphragm is contracting and relaxing. So this is originally dome shaped, but on its contraction, so almost it is getting flattened. So this is how the diaphragm helps the lungs in the breathing movements, as lungs do not have their own musculature. So this is how the diaphragm helps. So it is showing here the contractions and relaxations. So by the contraction of the diaphragm, so it is getting flattened, and during its relaxation, it is going to its original shape, that is dome shape. Students, are you watching? Yeah, it is very much clear here, isn't it? Yeah. Now I want to show you the action of intercostal muscles, students. So see this small animated video where it shows the action of intercostal muscles, how these intercostal muscles help the chest cavity to expand. So see here. So see how the intercostal muscles are helping the lungs to expand. So see here how the chest is expanding and coming to its original position. So by the contraction and relaxation of the intercostal muscles, so the chest cavity getting expanded here and coming back to the original position. So see once again, yeah, it is very clear how the chest cavity is expanding. Students, just want to ask one thing. Why don't you put your one hand on the chest? You put one hand on your chest and just close your eyes and focus on your breathing. Yes, and now you can feel the expansion of your chest, isn't it? So if you put one hand on your chest like this, close, and just focus on your breathing. So while breathing, what is happening when you are breathing air in, so your chest is expanding, isn't it? And during breathing out, again the chest is going back to its original position. Okay, now let us see the relation between a volume and pressure. Volume, here volume means the thoracic volume and as well as the intrapulmonary volume. So coming to the pressure of what? Pressure of air. Okay, so there is a relation between this volume and pressure with which the breathing is possible. So let us see what happens. The thoracic volume increases. So this arrow mark, upward arrow mark indicates increase, and the downward arrow mark indicates decrease. So upward arrow mark indicates increase. So what happens if thoracic volume increases? So if thoracic volume increases, what happens to the pulmonary volume? Pulmonary volume is nothing but the volume of the lungs, inside the lungs. So the volume inside the lungs is called as pulmonary volume. So if thoracic volume increases, the pulmonary volume also increases. If pulmonary volume increases, what happens to the pressure inside the lungs? So certainly lungs will have certain air, isn't it? So when the volume, the intrapulmonary volume increases, what happens to the air pressure inside the lungs? So the intrapulmonary pressure decreases. So if volume increases, so what happens to the pressure? Decreases. So see here, the thoracic volume, downward arrow indicates decrease. So if the thoracic volume decreases, so as pulmonary volume also decreases. So the thoracic volume decreases, the pulmonary volume also decreases, and as the pulmonary volume decreases, now see what happens to the intrapulmonary pressure. As the chest cavity gets tightened, isn't it? As it gets tightened due to decrease in the volume, so what happens to the intrapulmonary pressure? It increases. So as the volume increases, the pressure decreases. As the volume decreases, the pressure increases. So this is the relation between volume and pressure. So volume and pressure are inversely related. They are not directly related. Students, listen carefully. So they are inversely related, because if one increases, the other one decreases. If volume increases, the pressure decreases. So this is what I have explained you. So why the volume increases? How the volume increases? As the dome shaped diaphragm contracts, as it becomes flattened. So due to the contraction of the dome shaped diaphragm, as it contracts, it becomes flattened. So by this, what happens? Anterior posteriorly, the thoracic volume increases. Anterior posteriorly, the thoracic volume increases, and simultaneously by the contraction of external intercostal muscles. So what happens? By the contraction of external intercostal muscles lifts our rib cage, okay, outwardly and upwardly, outwardly and upwardly. So thus the thoracic volume even increases. So by these two actions, the thoracic volume greatly increases. As a result, what happens? The intrapulmonary volume also increases. So as thoracic volume increases, the intrapulmonary volume increases. So these two are directly related, isn't it? So if intrapulmonary volume increases, what happens to the pressure inside the lungs? So definitely it decreases. The intrapulmonary pressure decreases. So this is the picture showing the relation between volume and the pressure. So in the first picture, see, so here a volume is increased, so more volume is available. So as more volume is available for the molecules, so as the pressure is very less, it is showing a very less pressure. Whereas in the second picture, see, so see here the volume is decreased. So comparing to this first picture, so here the volume is decreased. So when volume is decreased, all the molecules come closer, isn't it? All the molecules come very closer, and because of this the pressure increases. So see here the pressure is increased than here. So volume, if it is increased, pressure decreases. If volume is decreased, pressure is increased, because volume and pressure are inversely related. Now, before we go into the mechanism of breathing, let us understand the concept of gases and pressure, students. Okay, so as you already know that the gases travel from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure, isn't it? The gases travel from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure. If you see this picture, so this is the area with high pressure. So here H indicates that here the air is with high pressure, and L indicates this is the area with low pressure. So here these arrows indicate the movement of air from high pressure to low pressure, the movement of air from an area of high pressure to low pressure. So this is generally, naturally the gases used to travel in this way from high pressure area to low pressure area. Now coming to the mechanism of breathing, actual mechanism of breathing, I already told that breathing is a very simple process. It is a very simple process. It is a physical process. Okay, it involves two stages. One is inspiration, and this inspiration is also called as inhalation. Another one is expiration or exhalation. So in the breathing there are two stages, inspiration and expiration. Now what happens during inspiration? What is meant by inspiration? Inspiration or inhalation? So here during this step, what happens? Air enters into our lungs. Air enters into our lungs. So this is called inspiration. But how this happens or how this occurs? So see, during inspiration, so the diaphragm contracts, as it is originally dome shaped. So by its contraction it gets flattened, so it is pulled down. It is pulled down. Okay, so anterior posteriorly the cavity, the thoracic cavity increases, the pulmonary volume increases, and simultaneously what happens? By the contraction of the external intercostal muscles, which increases the volume outwardly and upwardly. So by this what happens? As volume is greatly increased, so the pressure decreases inside. The pressure inside the lungs decreases than the pressure outside. So when there is a pressure gradient, when there is a difference in the pressures, atmospheric pressure and the pressure inside the lungs, when there is a difference in the pressures, so from an high pressure area to low pressure area, the air rushes into the lungs, passing through the respiratory tract. So this step is called as inspiration. So during this inspiration, the contraction of diaphragm and the external intercostal muscle takes place. With this, what happens? So see here, the chest cavity is increased or expanded as the volume increases, so as the pressure decreases, as the pressure decreases inside the pulmonary, like inside the lungs, so the air rushes into the lungs, the air rushes into the lungs from the outside, which is called inspiration. So see here, this is our chest cavity. So here, increase in volume means lower pressure. So lower pressure means there is a slightly higher pressure in the atmosphere. So the air from outside enters into the lungs, and this process is called as inspiration. So inspiration is nothing but taking air into the lungs, and this is an active process. Remember, children, whenever there is a utilization of some energy, so that process is called active process. So during inspiration, what is happening? The contraction of diaphragm and the contraction of external intercostal muscles takes place. So for this contraction, for this muscle contraction, energy is utilized. These muscles consume or utilize energy. Okay, so as energy is being utilized here in this process, so inspiration is definitely an active process because energy is consumed. Now see what happens during inspiration. So here inside the lungs, as the volume is increased, so there is low pressure. So the low pressure is indicated by negative symbol. So there is a negative pressure inside the lungs. There is a negative pressure inside the lungs. Whereas outside atmosphere, outside the body, a positive symbol indicates high pressure. So there is a positive pressure outside the body, whereas there is a negative pressure inside the lungs. So here low pressure, outside high pressure. So now usually the gases travel from, yes, high pressure to low pressure. So the air rushes from outside into the lungs, which is called inspiration, which is called inspiration. Now the next step of breathing is expiration. So during expiration, what happens? Expiration or exhalation. So here the air is expelled out of the lungs. The air is expelled out of the lungs. So during this expiration, the relaxation of the muscles takes place. Both the diaphragm and as well as the external intercostal muscles relax. So there is no energy consumption. So this is definitely a passive process. So this expiration occurs passively. So see here, again the diaphragm is attaining its original dome shape. It is coming back to its dome shape. As this, what happens? The volume inside the thoracic cavity decreases. As the thoracic volume decreases, the pulmonary volume also decreases. As the pulmonary volume decreases, the intrapulmonary pressure increases. And see here also the external intercostal muscles relax. Again, by this what happens? The chest comes to its normal position. So see here, the external intercostal muscles coming again back to their original position. By this, the chest cavity comes to normal position, isn't it? So by this, what happens? There is a decrease in the volume, which means there is a higher pressure inside the lungs. And when it is compared to the pressure that of outside the body, that is the atmospheric pressure, so definitely the pressure inside the lungs is slightly higher than the pressure outside the body, with which the air now moves out of the lungs. So as the air moves out of the lungs, so that is breathing out, or this is called as expiration or exhalation. So what is expiration? Release of alveolar air to the exterior. So this is a passive process, children. See, because here no energy is consumed, because the muscles are just relaxing, and for their relaxation the muscles do not utilize energy. ATP is not consumed here, hence this is a passive process. So see here this picture. So during inspiration, during expiration, what happens? So because of decrease in the volume, so there is increase in the pressure. So this positive symbol indicates a positive pressure, which means higher pressure. And outside the body here, a negative symbol indicates negative pressure, that indicates lower pressure. So inside the lungs, higher pressure, that is positive pressure. Outside the body, lower pressure. So higher pressure to lower pressure. So now see this arrow mark. So this is how the air moves out of the lungs. The air moves out of the lungs. So the gases, the air is expelled out of the lungs. The air is expelled out of the lungs, which is called expiration. Now children, look at this small video which shows both inspiration and expiration. So the inspiration and expiration occurs rhythmically one after the other. So this is like we can call it as a breathing cycle. So let us see here what is a breathing cycle, which includes inspiration and expiration. So see here how chest cavity is expanding. and again coming back to its original position. So this is inspiration, during inspiration. This is during expiration. Inspiration. This is inspiration. Again, this is expiration. So rhythmically, the expiration, the process of expiration and inspiration occurs. Okay. So this is called a breathing cycle or respiratory cycle. So breathing involves two steps. One is inspiration, another one is expiration. See here, students, this is process of inspiration. The chest cavity is expanding, and this is during inspiration, during expiration. Hope you understood. Now this is the picture showing the same inspiration and expiration. So these arrow marks indicate as how the air enters into the lungs, and here as this arrow mark indicates how the enter leaves the lungs.
Manoj,
now
sir?
students, we can increase the strength of our inspiration and expiration. So already we have diaphragm, we have external intercostal muscles for the process of inspiration and expiration. But apart from these external intercostal muscles and diaphragm, so we have some other additional muscles in the abdomen. They are called as abdominal muscles. So with which we can increase the strength of inspiration and expiration. So we have just seen the normal breathing, normal inspiration and normal expiration. Sometimes we definitely show some forcible inspiration and forcible expiration, like we call it as deep breathing. So like deep breathing, we put some effort in taking air, isn't it? So that is called as a forcible inspiration and forcible expiration. So at that time, these additional muscles which are present in the abdomen definitely help us in increasing our strength of inspiration and expiration. Now generally, a healthy person breathes around 12 to 16 times per minute. So this is the normal value of a healthy person. In an adult person, a healthy person breathes around 12 to 16 times per minute. But this used to change from person to person and from age to age, isn't it? If children are there, they respire more than this, sometimes 20, 22, 25 times also it may go up to. Okay, so this is like a approximate or general value. Now students, this is a machine called spirometer. So this is a machine called spirometer, an apparatus. So this is used to estimate how much amount of air is involved in our breathing. So how much air is taken in during inspiration and how much volume of air is coming out of the lungs during expiration. So this can be estimated. This can be measured by using an instrument called, an apparatus called spirometer. So with which the functioning of the normal functioning of health, the normal functioning of lungs can be assessed. The normal functioning of our lungs can be assessed with this machine, which is called spirometer. So this helps in clinical assessment of our pulmonary function. Pulmonary functions means the functioning of lungs can be estimated by using this machine spirometer.
Sir, Manoj, sir?
Madam.
Yeah, we'll stop the session here.
Okay, madam, no problem.
Then, for next session, we'll continue this presentation.
Okay, madam, sure.
Yes, sir. Today we children, we got very good, beautiful presentation from Manoj, sir. Hope you all understood. And thank you, sir. We'll meet in the next session.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much.
మన టీవీలో తర్వాత ఇవి ఉన్నాయి మేడం. 20 మెంబర్స్ లేకపోతే వాళ్ళకు
Manjari madam?
We are on live.
మేడం
Madam, we are done with the class.
Yes. I know. I'm calling Charita madam.
Yeah. Manoj sir? Manoj sir?
You say something about zoology then.
Yeah. Manoj sir? He's there?
Left. Neeraj, you speak something, ma'am.
Yeah, I'll speak. So today we discussed about the different more detail in about anatomy, that is about the lungs and the rib cage. Breathing is a part of a respiration. Since childhood, you will be learning in the lower classes about the respiration and the respiratory system in the form of breathing in and breathing out. That is the only way the science teachers would have told you, but that is not that easy. The respiratory system involves many steps. Breathing is a smaller part of it, isn't it? So what are the, Manoj sir have explained, what are the intercostal muscles and all those things, isn't it? So the muscles, diaphragm, all the other organs also help in the respiratory respiring, isn't it? Manoj sir, are you there, sir?
Yeah, he's joined. Mr. Manoj
Manoj sir?
joined.
No, if you want to conclude that, madam, if 10 minutes or 15 minutes are there, we would like to conclude it.
Yeah, more 10 minutes. If we can conclude, it's okay.
Yeah. Sir, you can start sharing and conclude it.
Madam, 10 minutes not sufficient, madam, because respiratory
Yeah,
volumes, respiratory
no,
volumes and
no, today's
capacities.
class only- Yeah, today's class only you revise. Just recap.
Okay.
Sir, you can start, sir.
Madam, I left from my laptop, madam. I will
Like,
join.
no need of presentation. You can sit and deliver your.
Okay, madam. Okay, sure.
Yeah. Because we are on live.
Okay, surely, madam. So, students, a quick recap of what we have learned in this today's session. So, let me